Republican, consultant, lobbyist, attorney general, senator, governor, state attorney general, state auditor, Southwest Missouri State professor, gospel singer with Max Bacon, author, public speaker. What do you like best?
Oh, of all the jobs I've had, the United States Attorney General was the most challenging and in a lot of ways the most rewarding. I'm glad I had that opportunity, but I wouldn't want to do it again.
What haven't you liked?
Oh, I think the job that was the most difficult for me was the job in the Senate, because there's so much challenge to getting anything done. When you have to get a majority of 100 people in the Senate to agree with you, then you have to get a majority of the House, which is 435 people, and then you have to get the president to sign it, and it doesn't look anything like what you started with. I don't think I'm just constituted to compromise that much in order to try and make it to the finish line. So I tended to like things that were more in the executive branch than in the legislative side.
The alleged Boston Marathon bomber has been charged in civilian court, not in a military tribunal, as an enemy combatant. Can you weigh in on that decision as a former U.S. Attorney General? Was that the right decision?
Well, first of all, pardon me, the fact that you charge him in a civilian court doesn't mean you couldn't also charge him before a military commission. Military commissions adjudicate violations of the laws of war. Now, if the nation is deemed to be at war and he's deemed to be an enemy combatant in that, he could be charged with a number of violations of the law of war because he attacked civilians, he didn't wear a uniform in the conduct of what he was doing. Those are all things that are chargeable as offenses against the law of war. He's also committed offenses which were against the state laws of Massachusetts as well as the federal laws. And the key for decision makers here is to make judgments based on the national interest and the security of the American people. If they come to the conclusion that there aren't any things that would have to be disclosed in a public trial in Article 3 courts, they may want to pursue that. If they come to the conclusion that he was involved with a variety of other co-conspirators and the information that would need to be produced in that kind of a setting would be against our interest to have it produced in open court, then it might be that he should be, if he's eligible, the president should declare him as an enemy combatant. So these are decisions that are fact-specific. I have to believe that the individuals at the Justice Department are considering those. It could be that he will be tried on multiple occasions. He was, it looks like he was filmed when they committed the murder of the MIT guard. That would support a state court trial. There wouldn't be much difficulty in providing the proof if it's on film. And the business about whether or not his Miranda rights were read to him is a bit of a tempest in a teapot. If the Miranda rights are not provided, the truth of the matter is that the only disability is that evidence that flows after the Miranda rights have been provided or haven't been provided would be ineligible. Well, since we're not going to rely on him for a confession to get a conviction if it's on film, or there are eyewitnesses, the fellow that was carjacked is an eyewitness who says he could identify these individuals and that they confessed to the bombing. So I think the Miranda stuff is a little bit overblown.
Is it a good idea for the president, I mean, do you agree with their decision to come out and infer that these two men were acting alone, or kind of make those assumptions and publicly make those assumptions, but then say that nobody else should be able to come out and make their own assumptions about whether they were alone or not?
I think assumptions are always dangerous. The idea of an assumption is that you come to a conclusion without facts, you assume it. And until we know who the facts are, until this is clearly understood, I think it's dangerous for us to make assumptions. That's one of the reasons I don't want to find myself in the business of second-guessing the items that are being undertaken here. They have information I don't have. I certainly hope they do. And there are a variety of facts which would cause me to want to make further inquiry. The notification of our country by other countries or another country of the potential danger this older individual provided as a potential terrorist, and the travel of that individual to what appears to be travel to terrorist sponsoring sort of settings in the world would lead me to want to examine pretty carefully the circumstances before coming to a conclusion. We may be a long way from a conclusion in this setting, and I think it will be some time before we learn all the facts. I don't think there's any necessity for a rush to judgment here, and I do believe if certain facts exist, which appear to exist, this individual could be tried either in a state court, in a federal court, or by a military commission, and it could well be that he could be tried in all three. Our Constitution prohibits people from being tried more than once for the same crime, but there are enough separate crimes that were committed by these individuals in this alleged against these individuals that there could be a series of trials that could last for quite some time.
Do you think because federal prosecutors are taking center stage on this, is it because Massachusetts doesn't have the death penalty?
That may be part of it. However, it should be noted that the federal death penalty exists in Massachusetts. And the federal death penalty would have to be, if the trial takes place in Massachusetts, which I think it's highly likely that it would, it might not be. In prior settings, I know that there have been federal crimes charged in Massachusetts, in the federal courts there, and Massachusetts juries have made a decision that the death penalty was appropriate. So you cannot assume that if the matter is adjudicated in Massachusetts, the death penalty wouldn't be imposed. The death penalty couldn't be imposed for state crimes committed in Massachusetts, adjudicated in state courts. But federal crimes that merit the death penalty, tried in federal courts in Massachusetts, might well end up with the death penalty.
These two gentlemen were U.S. citizens, are U.S. citizens.
What, pardon?
These two gentlemen, the one that died, the brother, and the one that...
I don't think they are.
Okay.
And they're not gentlemen either.
It almost...
They're individuals.
You were center stage in the war on terror in the Bush administration. It almost seems like we don't know who that enemy is these days. Is that a safe assumption? Is it getting that difficult?
I think there are stereotypes about the enemy that we need to be careful not to embrace because they lead us to limit our idea of who might be a part of the enemy. I think too many people associate the enemy with the Middle East and the radical, violent group of Muslims that are seeking to destroy the United States and to displace the liberty and freedom we represent. They're not limited to the Middle East. So we need to understand that we have a challenge to protect the security, safety, and liberty of the United States, and we can't define the potential enemy so narrowly that we ignore people whose purpose and intention it is to hurt us badly.
Put yourself, go back to being Attorney General. If you were the Attorney General when this had happened, say you were Attorney General last week, what's like the first three things that you do immediately without really even thinking about it?
Well, the first thing you do is to act to defend the culture from subsequent attack, follow-on attack, related attacks, copycat attacks. So to act in public safety is the first priority. And particularly as it relates to explosives and the like, you have to be very careful. So you take what knowledge you have and you use that as the basis for acting to protect the public. You would interview or examine what database you had that might be from the particular geography of an act like that to find out who the players are in that community, who people are that you had questions about, and you would obviously use those as primary leads. But you know that we live in an era and an age when virtually everything is photographed, and moving to identify perpetrators through the sort of inventory of the photographic record that we had, and that was you had to assemble that first because it came from private sources as well as governmental sources, to assemble that record and then to make the identification and pursue individuals that were involved, follow those leads. Assembling the resources was a very big part of having success in apprehending those individuals who allegedly perpetrated this crime.
Changing subjects, the real reason you're here in North Missouri to speak at the Friends of the College banquet here at Heartland. Theme of God and Country. What are the guests going to hear tonight?
Well, the guests are going to hear that we need institutions that do not pride themselves in moral neutrality, that have a willingness to state with clarity that there are virtues that need to be supported, understood, and reinforced in our community, like those that are a part of what this institution stands for. And as our education in general in the United States becomes more and more neutral, and fewer values are reinforced in the educational system, it makes more important all the time the idea of an institution that will stand up and be counted for things that make a difference, that will sustain and strengthen the